Success means that people I work with can find their own success and the kind of balance and reward in life that they are hoping for. And that's the way I keep score. Actually, I think of who those people are, and it's a growing list, and I'm proud of that.
So your success is actually other people's success.
That's the great reward to have someone say to me, "You really helped me."
The Thomas Green podcast is owned and made possible by Ethical Marketing Service. If your business is struggling with Google or Facebook ads, maybe you're frustrated figuring it out or there's a performance issue, Ethical Marketing Service has worked on hundreds of accounts and we can help in this area. We offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, and for every direct account we look after, we sponsor a child in a developing nation with food, water and education. If you would like to find out if we can help, it's a free, no salesy consultation call, and the link is in the description. Enjoy the episode.
Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the episode today, we have Dr. Grant Tate. Dr. Tate, welcome.
Well, glad to be here. Thank you so much, Thomas, for having me on the podcast.
I am very glad to have you. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, I operate out of Charlottesville, Virginia in the USA, and I have a small consulting company that I've had for well over 20 years. We work mostly with small businesses, typically high tech, and I'm working in organizational change. We offer coaching and personal development programs. And one of the things I say is that I'm a hot node hunter. And a hot node hunter means that I look for people who are the change agents in an organization when I'm working with them. And if you can identify those leaders, and they, by the way, may not be the executives or the managers, then you can probably create some good things. The last 12 months, I've been generally working on my book that's Hand on the Shoulder, Finding Freedom in the Confluence of Love and Career. It's a memoir, which is a little different from a business person, but it's been a great self-development process for me, and it's generated some really great conversation with my clients and my friends.
Well, thank you for that. Of all the things that I could ask you about, what tends to be your passion when going on podcasts?
Well, one of the things I think is really important, during the pandemic, a group of us, my colleagues across the country and in Europe, in fact, decided we would get together in a weekly forum to talk about what's going on. And we tracked how people were feeling. And I should say also, we invited clients. So we had a mixture of consultants and clients, and a very diverse group. And we tracked what was going on as we went through the pandemic. And I derived from that a couple of questions I think are really important that everybody, particularly leaders, need to ask. First is, who am I? What do I stand for? What is my leadership style? What are the principles that lead my everyday work? And the second question is, what is my role now? In other words, where everything is under change, where the future looks very untidy, let's say. How do I lead my people? How do I lead myself? And I might comment that I think my book is really my search to answer those two questions. And so what we found is that managers in organizations who were the designated managers weren't necessarily the leaders that emerged in this difficult time. The other important finding is that what people need in an organization, and you can say this at any time, but it's particularly true in the pandemic, is where are we headed? People needed a sense of stability when everything looks like it was floating. And so that was particularly important. What do we do about it? Well, each of us had our own thing, but I worked with my individual contacts primarily to help them be the kind of leader that we really need when we've got people that are remote. We have people that, and even now, a mixture of remote and in-office work. And that's just thrown things into a whole different kind of leadership style.
So in relation to the questions that you mentioned at the beginning, do you have a, should we say, a formed answer on the question, who are you?
I guess the question is, how do you find it? If I don't know, how do I find it? We have an exercise I call the role map. And essentially, we ask people to get a big sheet of paper and at the center, write your purpose in life. And then from that, define your different roles around that center circle: father, friend, coach, whatever it might be. And then from those points, write the various activities. And if when you look at that map, ask yourself, what do these activities have to do with my purpose? And if its answer is nothing, are you helping somebody else's purpose? It might be a reasonable thing to keep doing that. But also, if it has nothing to do with your purpose and is counterproductive or taking too much of your energy, get rid of it. And the example might be a destructive friend. But you also run into people say, wait a minute, I don't know what to put in that center circle. What is my role, primary role? What is my purpose? What am I all about? And one of the sort of procedural answers to that is, okay, look at the rest of the map and see what purpose you're living. And someone who's spending all of their time in something that's destructive, for instance, or something that's not productive, then the question is, why are you doing it? What can you do to basically center on the things that are really important to you? And I was just reading an article that came out from Gallup this morning about the number of people in the workforce. This is a global survey that are not engaged. And they had 5 primary reasons for that lack of engagement. And then they said, but the central theme among these 5 is a bad manager. You're a bad leader. And so what's going on with that bad leader? Is the person insecure? Do they lack the skills? Do they not know what they're doing? Or is the person not know who they are to be able to comfortably and authentically help other people be successful? And that's fundamentally what it's about. And it takes self-examination. There's no easy path. You have to go deep and you have to think. And one of the things we can do in our coaching process is to help people work through that process. And so the theme of the book, Hand on the Shoulder, I'm in the process of rebranding because my company is called Bridge Business Transformations, but I'm rebranding to use Hand on the Shoulder as the new brand, which is basically, what does hand on the shoulder mean? It's those principles that guide you. And it's the thing that you build your career and your leadership style and your relations on. And that should be a deep, profound sense of who I am.
Well done for putting it all down into the book. May I ask what your purpose is?
My purpose is really helping people find theirs. And I talked about hot notes. So one of the things that I try to do in my practice, whether I'm working in an organization or working with independent people, is to help them decide and find out who they really are. And therefore, what are my goals and where am I headed? And a good example of that, I'm somewhat active in the political realm, but I occasionally have the chance to coach politicians. And I had the occasion to work with a young woman recently that she's had the skill. She'd run before and lost, but wasn't quite sure what her path was. And by the end of the process, she was very clear on her goals and objectives, and has just recently declared to run for a seat in the legislature. And called me recently and said, "I've found my path." and I think she'll be really good at that. Win or lose, she'll be really good at that, because she's the kind of person who's a strong individual, believes in doing things right, and knows how to work with people of all different backgrounds and thoughts.
Well, I can certainly see how that would be rewarding, helping people sort of find the right path, as you put it. There was something I wanted to pick up on within, I think, maybe notes from the book, or it was a phrase which I believe that you used, and the term was inner freedom. Would you mind elaborating on what that term means to you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've done probably more research after writing the book than before the writing book on what do we mean by freedom. And the first thing I'd like to say is what it doesn't mean. And that is, it doesn't mean that you don't follow some of the basic rules of good relationships and what's good for society. In other words, by the station of who we are in society, says that there are certain ground rules that we have to follow. It doesn't mean we can't be creative. But that inner freedom is really that I can be who I am in the environments in which I'm working and living. A good example of that is that one of the things that my wife and I say to each other quite often is the precious gift we give each other is the ability to be ourselves. And my quirks and my idiosyncrasies certainly come out every day, but she knows how to work with those, and I know a lot about hers. So we can express ourselves, we can have the freedom to explore, the freedom to express our emotions, and that's okay. And I think that same principle applies to if we're working if I'm the leader of a group, then am I acting on a stage or am I myself? And can I be myself and let my people know who I am and what I believe in? And the other thing is within an organization, on my team, diversity really counts. And therefore, I shouldn't expect people to be like me. There are processes we have to follow. These are some of the restrictions we have in working in a team. But at the same time, we want people to be able to express themselves, to have the freedom to create, the freedom to express ideas, and then try to mold those into a team sense of direction.
There's a question that I sometimes ask, and I'd certainly like to know what your thoughts are. And that is, if everyone spoke their mind, would the world be a better or a worse place? Your thoughts on that?
There are thoughts that each of us have every day that might be quite destructive. I don't think we ought to just use those. And sometimes those thoughts are just a result of our inner concerns or our anger, perhaps. And so my question to moderate that is civility. And civility does count. We've had, I started to say arguments, and I really mean arguments, at the city council here in the city, where people were very disruptive. And for months, the city council got almost nothing done. And the explanation was, we've been suppressed too long. We don't believe in civility. Well, maybe expressing the anger is a good thing to let out of people if they're feeling that. But at some point, you have to say, therefore, what are we going to do? What can help you get through that? I think if everybody just went around expressing their rage, for instance, then I think we'd be in a lot of trouble. So, I mean, even if you take what just happened here in the United States about a gunman shooting down people in Chicago, that's an expression of some sort of rage or dysfunction, and that's certainly not positive.
Well,
so the answer is moderation.
I certainly like the civility aspect of it. I mean, in this hypothetical scenario, if he was expressing his mind before he did that, then perhaps people would know, which would be kind of a positive for prevention purposes. But it would also be quite painful for those who perhaps didn't want to know the truth about other aspects. But I must admit, I should have a proper sort of conclusion as to why I'm asking that question. I just find it an interesting question to ask, really.
Well, I think it's an important question because if you find people are upset, and this, I don't know the complete story, none of us do yet, but he expressed his rage and his concern on social media over the past year or so. Now, you might ask, who saw that? Maybe nobody who could help him. But if people saw that and said, well, this is just some wild and crazy person, and should we just ignore that, or should we really find a way to help this young person? And I think we should err on the second part, is if people are having difficulty, and that now relates to the team activity, which is if someone says something that might be totally out of order or express rage in a meeting, what do you do about it? Just say, hey, that's not acceptable, or take them aside quietly and say, let's talk, and I want to hear what you're concerned about.
Have you got a favorite part of your book?
My favorite part of the book is really the last part, where it was the upward spiral. But at the transition part, the part where I really hit bottom in some of my personal relationships and what was my recovery process and who helped me through that. A favorite in terms of pleasure, but importance, the most important part. And one of the things that I learned from this experiences I described was that at a time when I had a serious breakup of a relationship, I had nobody to turn to. I had worked myself into a corner of my professional life and my personal life where I didn't feel I could confide in anyone at the time. And one of the promises I made to myself, that will never happen again. And so that certainly was the most meaningful. One of my friends who had me on his podcast thought the turning point of the book was the chapter where I said I was driving from Paris to the Netherlands, and I said the cool French breeze is coming through the windows, and I am free. And that had gotten to the point where the guilty voices had stopped. I had made a decision to go explore new adventures in Netherlands, and it was a great sense of relief that I could get in a Renault van with all of my belongings and 6 bottles of French wine and and drive to the Netherlands. Yeah, it was a great moment. Yes.
Sounds like it was quite a therapeutic process for you. Would you say that's
Yes.
fair?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And just one complete side note is that the graphics on the book are really cool. Is there any story behind that at all?
Absolutely. The woman who designed the book and the cover, a young woman named Victoria Stingo, works for Hold On Publishing, the publisher of the book, interviewed me about 30 minutes and I don't know if she'd even read the book, she scanned it. And she came back in a week with 11 alternatives for the cover. And I was going through those and I came to number 5 and I said, whoa, that is really radical. Then I kept going and came back to number 5 and said, that's got to be it. And then my wife came home after work in the afternoon and I said, let me show you something. And I showed her the 11. She said, oh, clearly it's number 5. But the interesting thing about that Vic Stingo did not detect is that I wrote my master's thesis in electrical engineering on basically the mathematics beyond chaos theory. And in chaos theory, we have something called fractals, which are the graphic representation of what's going on in a chaotic situation. And she picked that up. Yes. But the other piece that she did was we have 108 stories in the book. And so the very short chapters I've found has been a really positive thing for readers because they can pick it up and read a story. And each story, to a certain degree, can be a mini case study for people like me.
And would you say for people who, let's say, have particular trouble finding their purpose, would the book help them?
Yes, well, I've gotten that feedback from lots of readers so far. One of the things I've said is that if one of these conversations I've had with people about the book is the only result of me spending the time to write the book, it was worth it. Because here in my office, I've had people come and they're usually acquaintances, people I know, people I've coached. And we have an hour and a half or 2 just discussing the principles of the book. And my reaction has been, wow. The other thing fascinating is that where people are coming from, if they're coming from the corporate world, for instance, then they are particularly interested in the corporate stories. But then I have some of my readers in Netherlands and one in Japan said, wow, I've learned a lot about the United States I didn't know. Well, I didn't realize that would be an outcome, but perhaps some of the stories in small town America at the beginning of the book are interesting in that respect.
Well, I think a lot of, I don't know what percentage. I mean, have you got any theories about what number of people as a percentage actually know what their purpose is, or who have even considered it?
Less than 5%.
Wow. Well, just
Yeah.
so even just discussing the topic is probably a positive thing to do then, right?
Right. Yes. Very, very definitely. And you know, I guess another way to look at it is finding your purpose is not something you can sit down like as we do in a strategic planning thing. It's a lifelong quest. Really, it's not an answer. It's a developing central theme of what am I all about, and that applies to situations as well when we're thinking about, oh, I have a difficult decision. But what's really important? What's important to me and what's important to the people around me? And I think the other thing that, of course, thinking about today's political situation is Americans are very individualistic. And one of the things you have to say, it's not all about me. It's what is my purpose as part of my community, of my state, my country, my family, and how do those relationships affect who I am, and then how do I then behave in everyday activities and relationships that really is central to that. And so we have, when we're not on that theme, we have cognitive dissonance. I'm acting on a stage. And I can say that when I was in the corporate world, where I was just, driving toward my ambitious target, then I was good at it, but I kind of lost me in the process.
Well, touching on your corporate or business experience for a moment, I think it would be, I don't know, a disservice to the viewers if I didn't ask you about your experience there, because I'm sure you've encountered many, many businesses, and there is probably a theme about perhaps common mistakes that businesses make. Have you got any thoughts around that topic?
Yeah, very much so. I think, let me just comment about my corporate experience. I worked for IBM, and I had 15 management or executive jobs, and I replaced 2 people. In other words, I was starting organizations or changing organizations. And one of the chapters in the book deals with the turnaround job I did with regard to a big software lab. And another story is all about starting the personal computer. I didn't start it, but I was one of the early people in working on the personal computer, which was a big change for the company. But the central idea, I think, of organizations is basically boils right back to the people, is selecting the right people and then helping them thrive in their jobs and helping them develop good relationships with people. When we're changing an organization, which is one of the, I was director of organization for a 30,000 person division. That's part of one of my jobs. But the key thing was, who are the leaders? Who are the people who can create this change, and who are the people that can help others in the organization? That's absolutely crucial. And so, people is the first sense. There's a sort of a central idea of empathy. Turns out we can measure it. We use a set of assessments, and empathy is one of the measurements. And the question has always been, if someone registers low in that measurement, can we help them? The answer is yes. It takes a little time. We can't just say, "Oh, hey, Thomas, you need better empathy." But through putting up your antenna, focusing and trying to understand people, listening to them, you can develop that even to a point where we can measure the change. So in our coaching process, we try to identify those things. First thing we say is focus on your strengths, but at the same time, you focus on those things that are keeping you from accomplishing what you need to accomplish in life and in your job. And let's try to identify those obstacles and then see what we can do to help them.
And in your experience, do businesses tend to have a purpose? And also, would the book help someone if it was specifically for businesses also?
Well, yes, I think so. Certainly, the stories about the corporate world and solving problems and that sort of thing has a lot of lessons. I attended a session last week, and one of the people there he was full of questions about business, and there was a lot more of that than I expected in that conversation in the hometown where I grew up. But he was very interested in what was going on in the corporate world and how that affected what we were doing. And so if I even if I look back at those situations, it's not all about me and my skills as an engineer or my technical skills as a manager. It was all about the people that were important to those situations. Who are the people that I worked with to try to create the kind of change we needed? The people that were really a source of strength and wisdom. And I think that's really important. And the other guideline is choose people that complement who you are and your strengths. In other words, and complement you, have the strengths you don't have. And if I go into a company and there is a mechanic runner, which I mean is somebody who's got a very narrow view, all about profit and whatever, then you have to ask, where's the strategist, where's the thinker? And if you have somebody who is all about strategy and a really good thinker of the concepts of the company, then where's the person who can take those ideas and put them into effect? And we talk a lot about diversity in this country and all over, but diversity in ideas is really important. And going back to your earlier question, those ideas people with those ideas need to have the ability and the freedom to express them in terms of helping direct where the business is going.
And regarding the writing process, how was that for you?
Well, it was interesting because the start of the book was that I got a call from the publisher representative one day and said, "Hey, I've seen your writing. Have you ever thought of writing a book?" And I said, "Of course, everybody has." And then we went through 3 different sessions talking about the concept of the book. And I said, I didn't want to write the 50,000 first business book because that's how many business books are printed every year. And it turned out to be a memoir. But then after we decided, we set a 6-month schedule. I had a project manager and an editor, and we had regular meetings to in one case every week, in other case every 2 weeks, where we went through, here's what I've written, and now let's edit that and let's move to the next one. I set up a Jira site, Trello site, where I said, here are all the chapters in progress, and I could move those to in progress, and my editor could look at that and see exactly where I was. Then when she and I got together, we just talked about what needed to change. Strangely enough, for a fellow who's done a lot of strategic planning, the larger organization of the book was the most challenging. I could write the stories. That was relatively easy, but how do you put those stories into a meaningful, larger picture? But so it was a fascinating process. And then actually the question of going back and looking at some of those things, and you ask yourself, oh, golly, what could I have done better? There are lots of lessons there for a writer who's in the process of contemplating your life.
Are you proud of what you've created?
Very much so. Very much so. I'm not shooting for a bestseller, but my wish is that it helps people.
Good. Well, I'm sure based on everything you've said, I'm sure it will. In terms of the promotion of the book, which is an important part of being an author, how have you found that, and what are your thoughts?
Well, obviously, having these kind of conversations helps. I am using social media, even TikTok, to talk about it. I say even TikTok because there's a lot of stuff that is not too serious out there. But I found that medium works. I am talking to local groups, particularly. I probably will have forums later on. The website handontheshoulder.com, which promotes the book, also has a section where we are showing how developing new coaching process, hand on the shoulder, of finding your own freedom. And that process is, I will be describing on the site in more detail. But basically, it's a process where we start first with a person with diagnosis. What's going on in the person's life? What do we know about you? The assessment process, and then talking about goals and direction, defining that goal, putting meat on that skeleton, and finally ended up with a sense of direction and purpose and knowing where they're going. And I'm pretty excited about that. We implement it by this medium, and I've found that particularly it's in many cases more effective than having someone sit here in my office. Of course, we can't have coffee, but one of the things that's important is that the assessments we do, gives us in some cases, a 70-page report. And so this medium is very effective in going through the data that helps set the ground rule for, here's what we know about you, and now what do you know about yourself? Based on that, let's talk about your strengths. Let's talk about your obstacles, and how can we develop a plan to get you where you want to go based on that foundation.
Have you got any case studies that you're particularly, shall we say, proud of in relation to how you've helped people find their purpose and answer those tricky questions, excluding the politician, of course?
I have not published those yet, but the answer is yes, quite a few. There's some of the case studies would be 10 years long because some of my clients have been 10-year clients. And I work in biotechnology companies here in town. One particular little case study that I found quite interesting was one of my friends, the CEO, said, "Hey, Grant, I think we have a communications problem. And could you do a survey?" So I went in and we did assessments and the survey, and I came back a while later and said, "Yes, you have a communications problem. And here's what it looks like." And then we had a discussion. And then at the end of that, I said, "Look, here are a couple of choices. I can sell you a very expensive communications workshop, or you can start daily huddles. Which do you prefer?" He started daily huddles, supplemented that with a weekly summary and a monthly summary of what was going on and what they were trying to get done. And we went back in 6 months, and the communications problem had diminished to almost nothing. That is a quite an effective one. We just did 21 personal assessments with a group in Amsterdam. And I talked to each person. And interestingly enough, it was a group of international people from Finland to Korea who were working in that organization. The leader's primary purpose was self-development. I want to give everybody an opportunity to have this conversation. And we talked about the assessments for about 45 minutes. And then the rest of the discussion was about, given this and what you're trying to do and what you want in life and your job, then what are the 2 or 3 most important things you can work on? And it was, I think, a very successful process.
Well, thank you for sharing those. I mentioned beforehand that there's a typical question I ask in an episode, and based on your introspection and especially what the book's all about, I'm sure you have a good answer. So, what does success mean to you?
Success means that the people I work with can find their own success and the kind of balance and reward in life that they are hoping for. And that's the way I keep score. Actually, I think of who those people are, and it's a growing list, and I'm proud of that. Where they can find me is the easiest way is handontheshoulder.com. And that will have all of my contact information and something about the book, who I am, and what we're trying to do.
So your success is actually other people's success. I suppose that does come back to your purpose, but it is interesting because I've not heard that answer before.
Yes, well, yes, absolutely. And so that's the great reward to have someone say to me, you really helped me.
Is there anything that I should have asked you about today?
Well, you ask a lot of good questions. Nothing pops into mind, but I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to keeping in contact. You're doing good work.
Well, I appreciate that. And for everyone watching or listening, please review the links in the description. And Grant, thank you for being a great guest today.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.